Greetings, everybody. Welcome to the Evidence and Reasons for the Christian Faith video channel. And this isn't a real background here because I'm in my little cubbyhole office, and because it's so cold and there's no reason to heat a 5-bedroom house when I could just be in a little cubbyhole under these temperatures. It's just a waste of money. And so I'm holed up in a little room. It was my dad's office, and now I'm sitting in the office, and I happen to have a green screen behind me. So you'll see real funny things. Emory was pointing out that when I had to wipe my nose with a handkerchief, my face would disappear. So you'll see stuff like that. But this is kind of a cobbled together show, kind of impromptu. I'm iced in and snowed in. I mean, I have driven around, but it's just not safe. You know, when it turns nighttime, the roads start to freeze up again, and I just don't, you know, my car is just not, it's a summer car. These Honda Civics are just not. I love little teeny cars because I don't have very good depth perception. When I was getting my medical for my pilot's license to fly, I barely passed my depth perception test. So I need small cars, but that Civic just does not do well in snow. Some of you know that near where I live in Woodbridge, Virginia, on I-95, people were stuck for 24 hours because a 50-mile backup. And we can credit the left-wing powers that be partly for their negligence on all this. I'll try not to talk too much about politics, but it just spills out. And so I've been snowed in and iced in, and so I've had more free time this week to do streams, and it's been great being with you all. And Emory is on semester break. He is a creationist biology student. And I just want to say, a lot of you know that my mom passed April 30th of this year. When my dad passed in 2003, I did not handle it well, but this year, with the passing of my mom, and I don't have any family, I'm all by myself now. And it really is even more underscored by the fact this 5-bedroom house is just empty and it's just me. But you all have filled my life and encouraged me, and I've not felt a lot of grief. I just feel like, you know, my mom and dad are in a happier place. It's just a little rough for me and a little lonely. But God's brought other good people in my life, like Emory and Rebecca and the people in the chat, and people in my dysfunctional church, ironically, David Platt's church. That's an entire crew right there with Joe Carter, Wade Burnett, David Platt, Mike Kelsey, and Eric Saunders, who recently said Jesus had dysphoria, and he was talking about, you know, dysphoria. I'm just like, yeah, that's the church I attend, guys.
Well, you don't attend there anymore because you can't.
Only virtually. Because, yeah, I got trespassed, threatened with jail and arrest. And you know what? I was thinking, praise the Lord. You know, God can work through a dysfunctional church because there are people that are faithful to the Lord, that love him, and still a part of the church, voting members, and they're fighting through all this. God bless them. And I sometimes wonder, Lord, why have you done this? And the best answer I can give from the scriptures is Deuteronomy 13. When God said that his people, when they enter the promised land, he's going to let false prophets in. It's very akin to when Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden, and God let that snake, let the devil in to make his sales pitch. God said, the reason I'm doing this is to test you, to see whether you love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul. And I'm like, Lord, help us all to love you with all our heart and all our soul. Help us to endure these tests where things are just thrown at us. So that's my mini sermon today. Emory, I think you have a shot at graduating at the top of your class. Is that a fair statement?
Well, I don't know about the top of my class, but with some decent grades, I should be able to graduate.
So today we'll be talking a variety of topics. I'll be answering some emails and some comments in the comics comment section, and I could call it the comic section.
Apparently, y'all are funny, he just called you the comic section.
Yeah, I've probably lost 100 subscribers because I've just thrown them off the channel. I call them howler monkey YouTube internet howler monkeys. And do you know what a howler monkey does? Can you describe?
Oh yes, I know what a howler monkey does. But rather than me tell you, why don't I just play a sound effect for you?
Sure.
So I'm gonna just run a YouTube video here. You'll hopefully hear this.
Okay.
This is from the Houston Zoo.
All right, you have to share your video, and then I'll.
Oh shush! I don't want to hear you. I don't want to hear you talk about them, Oni. Sorry. I didn't realize you were going to do this. I'm like pulling up stuff from the last.
All right, here you go.
So I had to click to a different video. Sorry, but they're loud. The point being, they're loud. Hearing that? No? Okay, then I'll have you play it. So I'll share it. Let me screen share it. I'll screen share it then. And hopefully it'll play that way. Let me share screen. Chrome tab. There you go. You're muted, Sal. Sal, you're muted. You're muted.
Yeah. So I had to. YouTube will let us show 20 seconds of copyrighted material, so I had to shut it off.
Gotcha.
That is
fine,
kind of a gross sound.
But
the howler monkeys also poop and then throw it at their opponents or whatever. So there was there's a time when it was said if a creationist started to make a public stand, he would be showered by howler monkeys, and the howler monkeys would just bother the creationist and throw poop at him and just make as much noise as possible. And that's what happens on creationist websites, blogs, and YouTube channels. Mm-hmm. And some people just can tolerate that, and I don't think it's conducive to the atmosphere I'm trying to cultivate here, where people can congregate safely. And people say, well, Sal, that's kind of cowardly. It's like, I've gone to secular grad schools. Mm-hmm. I have gone in front of debates, 10,000 audience. On Reddit, I probably banned 200 people and just blocked them. On this channel, 100. And there are probably 500 people that, if I were doing this, I could probably get 1,000 critics to be arguing with. And if I spent 1 hour per critic per year, that'd be 1,000 hours of my time. And it's just not worth it because they just regurgitate the same talking points. They never comprehend. I was talking to, email, like, you're just so dense, dude. I just totally destroyed what you said, and you just ignored it. It's like, I'm done. And every one of them's the same way. And I just don't have time for it. So, call me names or whatever, but not on my YouTube channel, brother. Set up your YouTube channel and have at it howl on your channel. And I know there's a YouTube channel that just adores me. I think I've given that YouTube channel incredible life because I'm the featured guest every day, and they just don't stop talking about me. And I love the attention, but they're not gonna, and they just love throwing poop on the screen, and that's okay. But I'm not gonna let them do that here. Emory, I can tell you wanted to say something.
Well, I mean, I kind of have a similar policy. Like, I'll engage with someone if they're having an open-minded, honest interest in discussing things. But I find that most atheists are not remotely interested in changing their minds. They're only interested in trying to destroy you. So I don't ban and block as much as Sal does, but I also don't have as many subs as Sal does. Sal has like 1.1 and I have like 230 or something like that. So
and I have a history of some
by the way, if
people-
you're watching and you haven't subbed to me, fix that. No, I'm just kidding.
Yes, please subscribe to Emory's channel. I need to fix that in the video description. So I just had to vent a little bit about why I don't deal with certain critics. I just don't have time. I certainly don't have time for high school dropouts who burned out their brains on drugs and alcohol and they think they know better. I'm just sorry. I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
I will talk to people who are scholars. I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, someone called me up and said, "Hey, Sal, and he described himself. He's a tenured physicist who will not be named, but he worked in a Nobel Prize-winning lab, and he's a great scientist. He's a professor of all sorts of classes in a secular school." And then I'm co-author with guys who train PhDs. I mean, I just don't have time for internet trolls. I just don't have time for the troll trash.
You can just stop right there. You're good.
Huh? I'm sorry?
I said you're a co-author with John Sanford. You can stop right there and you'd be good.
Ola Hosder, Bill Basner, Joe DeWeese. I mean, I just don't have time to deal with this.
Yeah.
So I was just venting a little bit because it does get to me occasionally. Because I released a video. Maybe I should show it because it's going to make me feel better. Let me see if I can.
You get to be the poster boy for one particular group of internet howler monkeys again, Sal.
I know. So let me just show you what got me in trouble. And this was basically it triggered a lot of howler monkey responses. It was kind of funny, I have to admit. Oh, here it is. Let me see if I can. I want to make sure I get the right video.
It could well be the best thing for the human race to get dumber and dumber until we lose our minds entirely. I mean, that may end up being the most reproductive, successful thing, right? But so be it.
You're still muted.
Thing. It could well be the best thing for the human race to get dumber and dumber until we lose our minds entirely. Thing. It could well be the best thing for the human race to get dumber and dumber until we lose our minds entirely. Thing. It could well be the best thing for the human race to get dumber and dumber until we lose our minds entirely. I mean, that may end up being the most reproductive, successful thing, right? But so be it.
I remember watching the long version of that clip, and somehow, for those of you who didn't never seen the long version of that clip, somehow Sal sat there and listened to him spew that drivel with a straight face and didn't laugh at him.
I started to smile.
You did.
Now, people who see the whole hour interaction, I was going easy on the guy because he would just be spewing drivel. I'm just like, I don't have time for this. But at the time, I was trying to humor him. The other thing is that was at the time before we published the paper with Basner, Sanford, and Hosder. And I did not want to tip my hand that I really had a lot more goods than he was giving me credit for, because I did not want to name who the co-authors were that were supporting what I was contesting. And we had covered R.H. Brady's paper here on this channel. And yeah, we covered R.H. Brady's paper on this channel, and we were talking about R.H. Brady's paper, and the guy you saw in the video could not comprehend it. I may have to switch to another system, because whenever I play video, it starts to mess up the system. Okay, so well, Emory, if you have some thoughts, and we'll cover stuff on the docket while I get the other system going.
Yep. I always have thoughts. It's just whether they're worth sharing or not. That's the actual question. So I'm going to stall while Sal fixes his computer setup. Thank you, by the way, everybody, for joining in. I see a couple of people I recognize. Patrick Alexander. It's been a while, Patrick, so good to see you. Let's see who else have we got. Wesley Coleman Music. I don't believe we've met before, so pleasure to meet you. And then Jesus Garcia. Again, I don't believe we've met. We may have. I have a terrible memory, so it is quite possible we've met, and we haven't interacted very much. So here's kind of what's on the docket for today. Sal has a list of things quite a long list of things actually that are out here for us to talk about. He wants to talk about the Discovery Institute conference, which is Saturday, January 22nd. And then the brief discussion of Gunter Bechly and Richard Sternberg, both PhDs, both evolutionists, both, as far as I understand it, atheists, and whether or not they actually understand how evolution works. And in other words, asking the question, do evolutionists understand how evolution works? Because you've all heard this, right? If you don't believe in the accepted paradigm, you just don't understand it, right? We've all heard this, right? If we've been around for more than 5 seconds, we've heard this. So do these guys not know how it works? Because these guys were both evolutionists for quite some time before they became ID proponents, which is kind of what they are now. So were they just evolutionists, or do they not understand how it worked while they supported it? I mean, can anyone understand how it works? That's always a legitimate question to ask. When somebody tells you, well, we just don't understand how it works, well, maybe you should ask them, well, can anybody understand how it works? And then don't just take their word when they say yes. Look at how they treat anyone who dissents. If they treat everybody who dissents as you just don't understand, well, they clearly don't think that anybody who disagrees with it can possibly understand it. So, anyways, Sal is back. So I'll let Sal go.
Yes. So if guys, if you see my audio and stuff, or who are watching the live stream, and it starts to break up, I might have to reboot this computer, because whenever I play a video, it just starts to hiccup. I just never know when it's gonna misbehave. So Emory won't probably be able to hear it when it goes wrong, but you guys in the stream can. So we will talk. I will be addressing some things in the email. It's always delightful when I hear from Christians that are struggling, or who are victims of maybe not the best creationist arguments, and then they go off to school, and they feel. I think they feel sometimes they've been lied to. I'm not saying that it's necessarily they actually were, because sometimes they just get a bad argument, but you still feel like you've been lied to. Mm-hmm. That your faith was supported by something that really couldn't support it, because it wasn't a good argument, it wasn't good data points. And so we'll talk a little bit about the distant starlight problem, and a lot of other things. So. And then we had some, oh goodness, my image just blew up.
Yes, it did. So that's not, because I'm watching it on YouTube, because I was responding to a comment, and oh yeah, your camera blew up.
So yeah, I'm way behind. I'm gonna have to bail and go to my backup.
Sal, your image fixed. Your image is fixed.
Yeah, but I may be behind in the audio. I might have to reboot, but we'll just keep going until it gets too bad and I do have to reboot. Okay. So we had some loose ends, not really loose ends, but we had some really good discussion yesterday, and I wanted to follow up on that. But so let's see what's first on the docket, and we'll just address it. So let me bring up an email. I won't show it. I was given permission to share it with you all, but it has to be on an anonymous basis. But Cindy Lincoln also brought up the topic of created light. So this anonymous email deals with created light, and I promised Cindy Lincoln, because she believes in created light, that's probably what she was taught by Kent Hovind. I wanted to make some comments on that, and I did promise Cindy that I talk about it, and I did promise this anonymous person that I would also talk about it, and I need to respond. So without reading his name, the email says, "Hi Salvador, I hope you're doing well. My name is blank, and I just found your channel yesterday. I've watched your videos with Cindy Lincoln and Rebecca so far. I like the sound of your approach to creation science so far. I listened to Kent Hovind's seminars back in high school and philosophically agreed with his points. However, more recently, I realized he was giving pseudoscience throughout those presentations. I've since come to the apparent age position of the universe and Earth. I'm not sure how familiar you are with that position, but I can give you a brief overview. The position states that God made the universe and Earth in their maturity instead of infantile stages. For example, God didn't make Adam a baby on the first day of Adam's life, but a grown man with the apparent age of however old he looked. We could speculate 30. In like manner, God made the universe with the apparent age of 14 billion years old and the Earth about 4.5 billion years old. Some people criticize this as deceptive, but why would God make the Earth in the Hadean Eon on day one? There is a reasonable explanation for this point of view. Apparent age is my current reconciliation between modern scientific dating methods and Genesis. I wondered if you could direct me to any videos of your scientific reasonings for young Earth creationism. Do you think I am on the right track with my current view? I know my point of view is unfalsifiable, but I think it relies on faith. I believe the spiritual nature of the Bible puts it in another league where you cannot prove it with the intellectualism you would use as with the Principia. I look forward to hearing from you. Have a great weekend." And as I said, name withheld. So
Well,
this,
Sal,
I promised a response. So go ahead, brother.
Before you jump into your response, because I'm sure you've got something very intelligent planned, I just want to point out a couple of things. First of all, this is why, even though years ago, Hovind, and I'm going to get myself in trouble, but whatever, functioned very well as a popularizer. Since his stay in government hands, and even realistically before then, he should never have been looked to as an expert on science. He wasn't, and he was treated as such. It's one thing he was a good popularizer, and that's all well and good, but he didn't know science very well, and the people he trusted as sources were largely cranks. Now, I understand his desire to be skeptical of the evolutionary community. Like I get that. They tell lies all the time, so I understand. But what he did was throw the baby out with the bathwater, and just dump the whole thing instead of being willing to put in the work and sort through the good and the bad. And by the way, anybody who is taking him seriously now, I have zero respect for. And you can repeat that to certain creationists on YouTube. I don't care, because the man is disqualified from public ministry in any way, shape, or form for multiple reasons. And if you're still taking him seriously, I'm sorry. You're still living in what I would call Stone Age creationism, where the only thing that we did was basically popularize. Beyond that, we need to actually take the subject matter seriously, not flippantly. So anyway, that's my rant.
Well,
And by the way, I say that I want to throw something else in. I say that as somebody who did the exact same thing this guy did and got introduced to him in high school, because the first thing I ever got in terms of creation science was Hovind videos, and I liked them.
yes. See, we don't have, not everything Kent said is wrong.
Correct.
But the problem is that it's like trying to teach math and you get half of it right. Depending on how bad your error, if you have a minus sign when it's supposed to be a plus sign, that could be really devastating. Okay.
Yeah.
Some
But
errors are worse than others.
Whereas if you round to the incorrect decimal place, that may not be quite as bad.
Exactly. So if it's like a little rounding error, we can let that go. But if you have a plus or minus sign interchange, it could be really bad. And so I've certainly done derivations where I was just off by like a plus or minus sign, and it just blew up. And heaven help you if that's something you're doing and it involves your personal finance. But yeah, the point is that it takes a lot of scientific discernment to sometimes see this, because some errors are more forgivable than others.
Yeah. And
if they're really severe, and these kids go off to college and they had built their faith, kind of like, Kent has had sometimes almost a cult-like following. They go in there and they learn real science and realize, oh my goodness, he got so many things wrong. So they end up doing what you say, they just dump everything, and some people just totally lose their faith. For myself, I was a Christian evolutionist. I believed in evolution, and I became a Christian. I still believed in evolution. And I was matriculating through secular schools. And then my views changed. So it's a little different from my perspective. It wasn't like I had any foundation that had to be pulled from under me. I already did not necessarily believe in creation. But then sometimes the evidence would come, and two things that really did it for me were consciousness, which, that's a little bit outside science, but I'm just like, how is it? I could make a computer. At what point is it self-aware like me? And it's like, there's something that kind of transcends the material world. I'm not saying that that's a proof, but that's just what happened to me. And then I got a hold of an ICR tract that talked about the origin of life, and that did it for me. When they just described the complexity. In that instinct, I became an old earth creationist. I couldn't quite reconcile it with the Genesis, a little literal reading, but that was still powerful enough for me. And as the years went by and they tried to just say, I kept hearing the evolutionists and the abiogenesis proponents and what they were proposing, it just started to ring hollow. And after decades, 4 decades, it just looks worse for them. And then I began to be open about 2 decades ago to the view that the universe is young. And I went off to physics to study applied physics at Johns Hopkins University. And I studied, even though it's applied physics, it was really meant for engineers who are going into the supporting physicists. So we had engineers at the applied physics lab at Johns Hopkins who would be supporting space probes that would study things like general relativity and cosmology. And so I took as many as kind of the little more esoteric classes like cosmology, because it was related to the engineering mission of construction of these space probes. And there it was, they're talking about the Big Bang and the inflation model. And they're describing galactic amounts of matter being separated at faster than the speed of light as the universe inflated. And they said how fast. Estimates went from 1,000 to millions to billions to maybe even infinite. And I'm like, when I heard that, I almost fell out of my seat. And I said, gee, and I thought the young Earth models were outrageous. I mean, this was just invoked with nothing. And it's only this year that some scientist, a Nobel Prize winner, Roger Penrose, and others have been saying, hey, you know, we've been telling you all the time, this is on shaky ground. And one thing that has come out has been the variable light speed theories to resolve some of these problems, because even the physicists said, you know, we can't accept things just being quote unquote, it's not exactly pushed around, but it's effectively moved around at millions of times the speed of light. You know, I'm just like, isn't it easier to make light speed up than to try to make a galaxy separate it? You know, you're just inserting space for no good reason, and it doesn't tie to anything we can prove. So that's how I slowly became grudgingly a young Earth, young cosmos creationist. And then especially when I worked, you know, after my degree in physics and I was working in the aerospace and defense industry, I worked for John Sanford, and I saw the biology side, then my mind was blown at just how badly the abiogenesis scenarios are, and then also evolutionary theory. You know, there are some things that I'll credit the evolutionists defending well with their phylogenetic trees and evidences of universal common ancestry. I give them credit for that, but the emergence of complexity is just not good. So we'll cover specifically created light, but I just wanted to build on your rant about Kent Hovind not being a resource. You're the second creationist that I'm really glad you've come out, because it doesn't look good on our community when we don't call out errors by our brothers. And I'll say this, if I say something that is technically wrong on a scientific matter, you're welcome. I would be glad you called me out on it. I would not want kids going to school and I gave them a wrong figure on math or anything. I would be grateful that you correct it. Of course, you better know what you're talking about, because I don't want you giving them bad material either.
Right.
So
yeah, if we mess up, bring us some papers. Show us where we messed up. You know, show us the papers. We want to be. That's how science is supposed to work. You're supposed to say, hey, no, hey, you didn't see this either. You didn't see this. You didn't know about this. Or you didn't understand this over here. And you got these 3 papers I want you to read.
And so sometimes I do have like the other side, like Dr. Dan, who's an evolutionary biologist. He reviewed some of my work. He said, Sal, no, don't show that diagram. That's wrong. That's obsolete. And it's wrong. It was by Haeckel. And I'm like, okay. And he was very generous and said, no, use this diagram. I use it in my classes. And I said, okay, I'm very grateful for that. And one thing I'll point out is that Emory and we're going to study under evolutionists to teach us about God's creation. Dr. Sanford said, no, I'm not, you know, Dr. Sanford did not send me to Dinosaur Adventureland. He sent me to the NIH. He paid money out of his own pocket to pay for my tuition to go to the NIH. I studied under evolutionary biologists. Now people wonder, how could you do that and learn? But, you know, that's part of the story when we're talking about the life of creationist researchers and graduate students in the secular world. We're kind of sharing how maybe you can survive and navigate this and be blessed to learn about God's creation from people that don't even believe it. Many of them may not believe in God. Some of them may be theistic, but then they believe the evolutionary process. But there are things that they can teach you and you can be blessed with. I know that when I was in my classes, there are a lot of days I would just see the complexity of life and say, I wanted to just say hallelujah. That would be when I was studying cellular biology and biochemistry. It had a little bit of evolution in it, but a lot of it was just showcasing God's work and majesty. It was beautiful. Even the evolution classes, it was useful, because if we're trying to reconstruct the phylogeny, which is kind of the family tree of humanity, we'll use their same techniques. We just feel that with created kinds, you can't extrapolate it across all species, but you can do it within an existing lineage. we might be able to reconstruct Adam and Eve's how far back genetically, or at least make a good enough estimate. And some of the estimates are that it would support a little literal reading of Luke chapter 3. So if you have any comments, I'm going to try to focus specifically on the distant starlight.
No, I think that was a good good exposition. I'm ready to go talk about distant starlight.
Okay, so Cindy said she believed in created light, and as the other email indicated, the first objection is this is deceptive. So just think about it. If you're seeing supernova in the sky, that never really happened.
Yeah.
That was just...
Sal, can I just pause you here real quick?
Yeah, please.
When she says created light, I presume she means light created in transit. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm presuming, Cindy, apologies if I misstated that.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
So
go ahead.
That would be very disturbing. It's like, did all those supernovas that we're seeing in the sky, are those just illusions of things that never happened? And it would raise, and one thing I really want to point out for young Earth creationists and what I call the young cosmos creationists, because the Seventh-day Adventists are a little bit agnostic on what the entire universe is.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to say there are flavors of young Earth creationism. I'm a young cosmos creationist.
Yep. And
I will say up front, the problem of distant starlight has not been satisfactorily solved by the young Earth creationists. I'll tell you why. When it comes to the origin of life and the origin of major created kinds, we invoke miracles. And that's just easy to do,
Mm-hmm.
We accept it by faith. Any of you who've had answered prayers and you've experienced miracles in your life, it's not, it's not a big deal for you to invoke miracles. A lot of the challenges for the young cosmos and the young Earth creation models is we're actually trying to find naturalistic explanations rather than divine miracles. So we'll say the first creation of the planets, the stars, the life, miracle. But then after that, like the flood will be mostly naturalistic mechanisms, mostly the things that we can reconstruct using science. And then we're also trying to explain distant starlight using science, except for the people that will say that the light is also created in transit. Mm-hmm. And so you're basically saying God is creating an illusion, by special creation. And as I said, that aesthetically it just doesn't feel right. But there's another problem that many people don't consider. When the Lord returns, he said there'll be disturbances in the sky, things that will cause men to fear and tremble, because it does say in the book of Revelation, people will say, let the mountains fall on us to spare us from the wrath of the Lamb. There's going to be a lot of people that know something bad's coming down. And in the Gospels, Jesus is saying that men's heart will be fainting for fear. And you'll see disturbances in the sky. So were those created en route too, where these are just total illusions? I'm just pointing that out. That's just from a kind of a philosophical. But let's look at the evidence though now, because what began to convert me toward the idea of a young universe, it began with something more basic. How about how young is humanity? And when I kept hearing about how we're degenerating, and I kind of started sniffing around, it's like, oh, the secular guys are saying this too, that our genomes are deteriorating. There is Brian Sykes, Oxford, geneticist. He did a lot of stuff on mitochondrial Eve and Y chromosomal Adam, and he's been kind of almost seems like a little bit shunned, because he said we're not going to last more than 100,000 years. Men are going extinct. And I don't know how he came up with this, but it was kind of funny. You'll have a day when there'll be only one man for every 10 women, which I thought was kind of cute. But I don't know credible that is, but he did cite genetic deterioration. Then Alexei Kondrashov, who was a colleague of my professor at FAES NIH, he said, he posed the rhetorical question, why aren't we dead 100 times over? And this is becoming uniform. You know, why are we getting dumber and dumber? to even quote the evolutionist I showed earlier, it would seem that, okay, if we're degenerating, that meant we were in a better state. And that did make me believe in the long ages of the patriarchs, not just in the early chapters of Genesis, but when in the later chapters where Pharaoh asks Jacob, "How old are you?" And Jacob responds, "I'm so many years, but I've not lived as long as my ancestors." And I'm like, that's really compelling. And that was a stumbling block for me when I was an early Christian. I said, I don't have any evidence that people are living that long. But now it becomes believable when you see that we're degenerating. That lends credence to the idea we were much healthier in ages past. So that's an evidence then that it's not apparent age. We are, it may indicate that humanity is young because we should be dead by now if we took millions of years to evolve.
Right.
So that began a little bit of my journey. And then the stuff I learned in graduate school, the Big Bang model could be falling apart. There are whispers, because I was a student of physics, you know, among the professors, like my undergrad was at George Mason. There were 3 professors there, science professors, respected astronomers, saying, publicly signing statements that they didn't believe in the Big Bang. And,
and those rumblings are getting louder now because now they're talking about no beginning to the universe again. They're going back to the no beginning model, which throws the Big Bang right out the window.
Right. So, I mean, that's kind of going the wrong direction as far as I'm concerned, because you want it younger, whereas no beginning means it's an eternal universe, but that has other problems. But suffice to say, these 3 professors at George Mason were dissenting. And I'd say 3.5, because one of my professors wrote James Trefil, and he wrote, this is public knowledge, he wrote a chapter in the book, The Dark Side of the Universe. And he said, the 5 reasons galaxies shouldn't exist, because classical physics and the Big Bang don't mesh with the mechanics of the galaxies. He said that's one of the thorniest problems in cosmology. So he wasn't rejecting the Big Bang, but he was honest enough to say this is really problematic. And then the other professors, and I'll name them, Minas Kafatos, PhD, MIT in physics, Sisser and Makibullah Roy. Makibullah Roy recently published, he went back to India, and he recently published a critique of the Big Bang that got published in one of the most prestigious astrophysics journals, mainstream, critical of it. And so this is, you know, I'd say it's a little bit too early to be invoking apparent age if you're thinking the Big Bang model is on a good scientific footing. There's been a lot of dissension, and I've been hearing there are a lot of younger professors that just don't want to touch cosmology. They have their doubts, but they're not coming out. They'll go on into some other area of physics that doesn't deal with origins of the universe. Like there are all sorts of things like condensed matter physics, you name it. Cosmology is only a small part of the physics enterprise.
Right, yeah, physics is a very broad category.
Right. But then I study also like the age of the fossils. There's a lot of there's some radiometric dates that would support an old Earth. So let's even grant that for the sake of argument that the Earth and solar system are old. It doesn't mean that the fossils are necessarily old. So I often said if you have a dog and you bury him in 65 million year old rocks, and then someone digs him up like 100 years later, you're not going to say that the dog is 65 million years old. You need to examine the biological tissue. You don't date the dog by the dating of the rocks. So
Right.
even if you have rocks that are dated supposedly at millions of years, you have to look at the biological tissues. And I've done research on that with racemization. I'm going to the ICR this coming January 22nd, and I'll make another announcement about that. I'm going to meet with people there, and someone here has appeared on my channel. He's a professor of organic and biochemistry, Dr. James Carter. We have found that there are biological materials at the Cambrian level, which is what, 500 million years ago, supposedly, that are non-racemic. And I know these are technical terms, but it means that they're not aged. And even though racemization dating is highly unreliable to give an exact date, even if you slow down the clock as slow as possible based on the data we have, because there's factors of 60, you can accelerate it by a factor of 60, and you could slow it down. The difference from the slowest to the fastest is a factor of 60. But let's be the most generous and use the slowest clock. It's still not enough to say how come it's still there in the Cambrian. I found an old 1960s paper that discovered it, and of course it would be buried and people would dismiss it. But you know the nice thing? We can dig up Cambrian fossils and we can examine them. If people were really determined to resolve this, we have the means, but you know the government's not going to fund it because they'll say that's pseudoscience, you know, all the people who are in control. But I think it's going to start to pop up because we've been seeing this pop up with the oil industry and all sorts of industries that, you know, will passingly kind of measure their carbon-14 levels. Well, that's another thing. So you have carbon-14 where it shouldn't be, like in diamonds, and they'll explain and obfuscate the problem away, even though our accelerator mass spectrometry can detect at that level. They suddenly go into this mode. It's like, oh, it's just unreliable at that point. It's like, yeah, that's a nice cover story. You know, we are capable of detecting low levels of carbon-14. And what's carbon-14 doing in diamonds? They're supposedly, and we can detect those too. Now, if the institutions were really determined to settle this case, they could, but they're unwilling, and it's understandable because reputations are on the line, and so are funds. Emory, you're just chomping at the bit to say something.
Well, when you said racemization in the Cambrian, I immediately thought, not possible. Not possible. 500 million year old rock should not have unracemized organic material. It just shouldn't. No way. Should not be there at all.
At all.
So it should be long gone. I'm like, but again, they could talk about that in the 60s because A, the creationist movement didn't really exist, so they could be more honest, and B, they kind of like, well, whatever, you know, we'll figure it out. Well, 60 years later, they haven't figured it out, and now they have to bury it.
Yeah, they have to bury it. But then we had the dinosaurs that was discovered by a theistic evolution. Mary Schweitzer, God bless her, because she's going through a lot personally.
Yeah,
I believe her conversion was real.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think the Lord's working in her life and just saying, hey, you know, Mary, I'm trying to tell you, look at this.
I literally handed you young Earth on a silver platter.
And I do feel for her. I mean, I think the young Earth community has just been lambasting her. But I just read it differently. It's like, Mary, you're just fighting this. And just like you said, the Lord handed you this on a platter. She got these dinosaur tissues that look young. All the chemical dates look young. And I found out through Rob Carter, because he was quoting a recent paper, because people are saying, oh, it's bacterial contamination. He said, no, we found out the cells have chromatin, which is a signature for non-bacterial. That is dinosaur tissue. So I started to get excited. So, and there are all sorts of problems. So I'm just saying to everyone who thinks in the appearance of age, it's like, I think that's starting to fade. Don't count on the mainstream being accurate anymore for this, because in some of their papers, you could just tell they're admitting that it doesn't look right.
Yep, things are starting to break, and I feel sorry. Well, I don't really, but I feel sorry for certain old Earth ministries that have hitched their wagon to the Big Bang, because I'm not sure how much longer the Big Bang is going to hold up. And when it goes, so do those ministries. Yeah.
And I love Hugh Ross. When he came, when I nearly left the faith, he did some. He had an organization, and people that like Fuzz Rana and Richard Dean, who were really good biologists and chemists. And I read their stuff, and it helped me stay in the faith, because they were very good at criticizing abiogenesis and evolutionary theory. They also talked about fine tuning. And so when Hugh Ross was in the area and he was speaking at University of Maryland, after my class at the NIH, I fought through traffic accidents and stuff to get there. I reached him 10 minutes before he was about to leave, and I said, "Thank you, Dr. Ross. I wanted to thank you for helping me when I nearly left the faith." So this is not when I'm critical of Hugh Ross, I say so with a little bit of remorse, because I love the guy to death. You know, I don't agree with what he says. I don't agree with his theology, but, you know, kind of like a parent that doesn't have it all together, but he did a lot of good for you when you needed it. That's how I feel about Hugh Ross. And so I'm not endorsing his views. And go on, Henry.
In Ross's case, he's not young. Before the Big Bang falls apart, he will probably be dead.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be rude to the man. I'm not. I've said things about Hugh Ross that are a lot harsher than what I'm saying right now. Ross, he's not young. He's probably in his late 60s, maybe early 70s. It's hard to tell because he has no hair. But you know, he's not young, and scientific theories do not fall apart quickly. They're not like, you know, governments. They take very short periods. They take long periods of time to fall apart because you have to overturn the existing paradigm. So it's quite possible that Ross will be deceased before the Big Bang falls apart. But, you know, people like Rana, who's I think is a little bit younger, and Jeff Swearink and these other guys who work there, they're gonna have to deal with the fallout, and it ain't gonna be pretty.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, he's 76. I gave him. I was being nice. I thought he was in his late 60s. Okay. Wow, I didn't realize he was that old.
So you know, because out of my personal respect, a lot of young Earth creationists do not respect them as much as I do. But, you know, when I was a struggling soul and he helped me along, I have just an incredible gratitude toward him because of that. Even though now I totally trash his cosmology. And so I'm just saying this as a friendly critic that don't have a personal axe to grind. I have issues with his theology and his cosmology, but his cosmology is now challenged by the mainstream. So I would not hitch any ministry to mainstream cosmology at this point, because it's on shaky ground on so many levels. There's a growing anarchy there. So this whole thing about created light, you may not need it. Now, me personally, because I'm interested in this, and I'm going to say no young Earth creationist has had a universally accepted, in terms of the young Earth community, solution to the distant starlight problem. It's not like creation where we invoke a miracle. Everyone will say, miracle made the first life. No disagreement there. But now, since we're trying to deal with naturalistic mechanisms, there's going to be a lot of disagreement. I personally I like Reginald Cahill's model of variable speed of light and the ether. And people criticize me for the ether, but I'll walk you through some special relativity stuff, and I'm just going to say it just really looks like it. And I'll cite the Hafel-Keating experiments. It's like, how does the clock know that you're going west to east or one direction or not? It seems to know when you're quote unquote at a zero velocity because of the time dilation. So I'm just briefly throwing that out there. And there are secular dissenters like Reginald Cahill and others. And there's this website that is non-creationist, that hates creationists, called Conspiracy of Light. It's a really good website if you want to see, because it has a lot of my objections It talks about experiments in physics and things I didn't even know when I was in grad school, like Fresnel drag. It's just incredible. It's like, wow. And I've actually reconstructed one of Reginald Cahill's laser interferometers. You can build one for cheap. And he has other experiments that have shown that we can detect, it seems to be absolute motion. And this is going to be very interesting because I'm going to give you one data point that is very close to home. I used to work for MITRE Corporation, and the president is Marty Faga, at least the time when I was going there. I'd see him sometimes in the elevator. I'd pass him. MITRE was like had a $500 million nonprofit budget, congressionally authorized. They had Marty Faga and others in the GPS, the official GPS committee. There's like a GPS council. It's the GPS council, and they advise the formation of all the technologies. They authorize, they govern the GPS technology. And I showed when Dr. Sanford came to my house, and he's obviously a biologist, but I told him, I said, hey, John, okay, I know you hired me to do biology, but I got to tell you, I still have a love for physics and the distant starlight problem. Let me show you my interferometer. And I showed him the interferometer I built that was based on Cahill. Now, my results were inconclusive, meaning I didn't affirm or deny. I just couldn't get the thing to work. And I did write him, and he said, try another experiment. And I'm like, I think I have to buy a $500,000 oscilloscope to run this, or I could rent time on it. And I just moved on to other things, but the math was impressive. But let me tell you, when I showed John Sanford my interferometer, he said, yeah, do you know Ron Hatch? I said, I've heard of him. He said, yeah, he told, he's on the GPS council. And I'm like, what? I know Ron Hatch doesn't believe in Einstein's general relativity. And you let him be on the GPS council? How did that happen? And John said, well, the GPS has a correction called the Hatch filter named after him. The GPS won't work without the Hatch filter. I'm like, you got my attention here, John. And he said, yeah, I'll put you in touch with him. Sadly, Ron Hatch passed away before I could meet him and express my gratitude. He was at the Applied Physics Lab. That's where I took classes, at the Applied Physics Lab at Johns Hopkins. So that's my little connection with him. But Ron Hatch said his skepticism of general relativity began when he constructed this GPS correction. So your GPS works today. When they say it works because of general relativity, I said, there's a caveat here. There's one guy who questions Einstein's formulation of general relativity, and GPS works because he put his filter in the GPS. So just think about that. And
that
so
raises
Marty,
some significant questions. Not that I'm,
right.
But.
So I just want to tell the audience, you think about that. You think about that. And so I got that from John, and it's like, there were guys from my prior organization that are on the GPS council. And I said, this is a big deal. So I'm just saying there's ambiguity right now on all fronts, even the mainstream, because the mainstream is the ones that are also putting on amendments to Einstein's theory of general relativity. And they're talking about variable speed of light. That would just blow the whole thing open. Now, there are other theories like Jason Lyle's one-way speed of light, and the one that's kind of like revered right now by people that actually understand general relativity is P.W. Dennis's stitching solutions to Einstein's field equations. P.W. Dennis actually got awards from NASA for his work on general relativity, because you have to use general relativity to make subtle corrections to our space probes. So he actually knows he's a published author in the Physical Review Letters. So he's like top tier, and he's a young Earth creationist. He had the most innovative. And so he's revered mathematically. Of course, we have Russell Humphries and John Hartnett. I was invited to be John Hartnett's PhD student, but I couldn't leave my mom and go to Australia. He was very generous. So Cindy and the gentleman who wrote to me, I know that's an extremely long answer, and I said I was going to try to be brief, but you know me, I can't be brief about anything.
Sal, you're never brief. You're never.
So suffice to say, this is not an easy topic, and I think the young cosmos creationists, we have God who built the universe, and you know, you just look at how big the universe is. It's like our God can do anything. The question now is whether he's going to reveal his solution to us, and he has revealed a lot, and that's why, even though it may not be exactly in the Bible, I have a lot of faith. Just like he's showing us the fossils are young when it looked like there was no chance that Noah's flood could be true. It's starting to pop up now. And we might well be able to do geology better because if we're willing to open our eyes. There could be also exciting developments in our understanding of nuclear structure for like radiometric dating. We're finding out, and this is when I was at Johns Hopkins, and I was taking solid state, graduate level solid state physics, and we had like our term papers. And I had to rescue my grade, so I said, I'll take a gamble, being the gambler I am. I said, I'll take an outrageous topic, and the professor's either going to have my head or he's going to say this is the topic of the night. And I went to the Homewood campus and went to the library for 2 days. I looked at all the experiments of how we can modify nuclear structure and change nuclear isotopes and accelerate, quote unquote, either accelerate decay or remove radioactivity. The more important is removing radioactivity.
Right.
And I looked at all the secular experiments and my jaw dropped. I said, no one's talking about this. I mean, they'll get published, but then it's not like put in the popular press. It's not featured.
It gets out there and like 3 people who read those journals actually talk about it. Nobody else does.
So there was it was in the 1980s, Nature did publish that lightning strikes cause neutrons. And that did, I didn't know electrical activity, sort of an atomic, bomb that does have some electricity in the process. I didn't know that could cause neutrons. And then I looked at all these transmutation experiments where you have these neutron generators. You flick an electric switch and they'll start generating neutrons. I'm just like, that's really interesting. And then they had these Z-pinch experiments, and they were able to create isotopes in the process. And then some at the Proton 21 lab, they're able to use electricity, and they could either create new heavy elements or they could remove radiation. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And I was thinking about getting my PhD in physics at University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, because they're favorable to this sort of work. And now recently, there's been a lot of stuff with, for lack of a better word, cold fusion. The Japanese government and a lot of Mitsubishi heavy industry, and I saw this in the IEEE, Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, which is the society I was a member of. They're talking about this as, because there's an interest in green energy. We're able now to change nuclear structure with electrical and chemical means. Now, it's very rare that you have to get everything to align just right to get it to be done in the lab. But if you have high power electricity, you can change nuclear structure. And so if there is electrical disturbances connected to Noah's flood, it could be explained so many features of radiation. And so they're exciting frontiers here. And you know, I've covered the reason I'm just naturally verbose, but you know, normally hear me talk about biology because that's my professional work. But I rarely talk about kind of the physics and geology side, but that's where my passion is. And as I said last night, kind of a little bit of an announcement. I may be slowly kind of easing out of the biology work. It was a great season, but my love has been the physics, the radiometric dating, the chemistry work, the other side of young Earth. Yeah, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, only because I want to keep your brain in biology, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, I think I'll continue to have my hand in it because the harvest is so ripe. You know, I think maybe I'll go where the harvest isn't so ripe right now, where the ground needs a lot of tilling. So we can move now to other topics. Oh goodness, we're already at an hour. Oh boy.
I knew this was going to happen, Sal.
If you have any thoughts before we move on to our other topic.
No, that's a topic that is mostly outside my realm, so I'll let you go for it.
Okay. So, and we talked about the internet howler monkeys, and we took care of that topic. The next topic is the Discovery Institute conference. You can look, if you Google the Faith and Science Discovery Institute Faith and Science Conference, is January 22nd. Unless I come down with Omicron or some other sickness, I'm planning
the world ends between now and then.
Yeah, I don't want to be a super spreader, and really there are family members that do have respiratory issues that could kill them if I'm in contact with them. So I've been vaxxed. I've been vaccinated. I haven't taken the boosters, and I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I've had probably 1,000 vaccinations at this point in my life for all sorts of things. So I'm definitely not an anti-vaxxer. I do question the efficacy and the honesty and reporting of the current vaccines, and I do not like the vaccine mandates because I'm questioning the efficacy of and the testing, and I'm not the only one that's questioning it. But I'm just saying I may not make it. That might be the only thing. That or an ice storm will prevent me from the Dallas conference, January 22nd, Saturday, in Denton, Dallas, which is a suburb of Dallas, Texas. Yeah, Denton, Texas. Sorry, I got that totally messed up. So you can look me up there. If you see me, it'd be a nice opportunity to meet and greet. But I got to tell you, there'll be so many more cool people than me there that you probably won't have any time for me. So there is someone.
Sal, if I was going to that, I'd be going specifically because I wanted to see you. So it had nothing to do.
Oh, God bless you. Well, I expect we'll run into each other sometime. Yep. And someone here in the chat said he's planning to go. So that's really cool. So the registration fee is about $45, I think. Because they've stopped their. Well, no, you might have one more day to the early bird registration at $35. So just thought I'd tell you that. So that was the next thing on the docket. So
yes, but the plane flight will cost a lot more than $35.
I honestly might drive because I have a sick relative I need to visit on the way through Memphis. We don't know how long he may have. He's my brother-in-law, and so that's why I said I'm very sensitive to the COVID issue. I do not want to give him coronavirus if I happen to have it. So anyway, the next thing on the docket: Gunter Bechly and Richard Sternberg. Do you follow any of their work or their lives or their history?
I know a little bit about Bechly and Sternberg. I both know they both got canceled hard after they even questioned anything about evolutionary biology. Bechly's a paleontologist, and Sternberg might be as well. I don't remember what Sternberg is.
Sternberg was an evolutionary biologist.
Ah.
So, can you bring up? You're a better reader than I am, Emory. Can you bring up richardsternberg.com? He has a website.
Sternberg.com. Let me find.
And he has this Smithsonian Controversy. Now, this is a long time ago. He's since kind of gone into seclusion, quasi-seclusion.
Yeah, I haven't heard much from him in a while.
Oh, and I know that his stuff is good.
Yeah, the little bit I know about Sternberg is pretty positive.
Oh, anything he publishes on publicly is just so good, and you're like, we want more. And I'm like, okay. I think the reason it's so good is he spends years studying a topic. And we're talking about evidences in favor and against common ancestry. This one is really problematic. Even if you assume common ancestry, you would need a miracle. So,
all right, so there's Sternberg, and then there's the section.
Oh, let's go to the Smithsonian Controversy. If you want to read it for our audience.
Yeah, doesn't look like it's too long. In 2004, in my capacity as editor of the Proceedings of the Biological Society of Washington, I authorized The Origin of Biological Information in Higher Taxonomic Categories by Dr. Stephen Meyer to be published in the journal after passing peer review. Note, it passed peer review. Because Dr. Meyer's article presented scientific evidence for intelligent design in biology, I faced retaliation, defamation, harassment, and a hostile work environment at the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History that was designed to force me out as a research associate there. These actions were taken by federal government employees acting in concert with an outside advocacy group, the National Center for Science Education. Shocking. Efforts were also made to get me fired from my job as a staff scientist at the National Center for Biotechnology Information. Subsequently, there were 2 federal investigations of my mistreatment, one by the U.S. Office of Special Counsel in 2005, and the other by subcommittee staff of the U.S. House Committee on Government Reform in 2006. Both investigations unearthed clear evidence that my rights had been repeatedly violated. Because there has been so much misinformation spread about what actually happened to me, I have decided to make available the relevant documents here for those who would like to know the truth. And there is a bunch of different documents here that you can read if you'd like to.
When they said U.S. House Committee, Congress was involved in this case. This was so egregious.
Because he was a government employee.
Right. When he said National Center for Biotechnology, that's an NIH organization. And so it's really sad when I was walking there on the campus of the NIH, I'd say Richard Sternberg was here. And my professors also may have been his colleagues, which was kind of chilling. I mean, it did, they were NCBI employees. And I know some NCBI contract employees too. And it just kind of, you start to feel like this is really hitting close to home. He has 2 PhDs, one in systems biology, but his first was in evolutionary biology. So when they say all these people that are in supportive ID, they don't understand how evolution works, I'll say, okay, what about Richard Sternberg? And then I'll ask the question. And oh, by the way, this is a promotion for Dr. Dan Stern-Cardinal. He's giving, we have 10, I don't know if he's already announced that on his website, but we were invited, both Emory and I, because we're creationist graduate students and researchers, to be in his Ask Me Anything. And I said, Dr. Dan, I'm personally not going to try to embarrass you or anything, and I'm not trying to pick fights. I want to stay on good terms. It's been a very productive working relationship among adversaries on different sides of the creation-evolution controversy. And I already told him my question in advance. I said, do you know anything about the third way of evolution? And my reason for asking that is it's really another way of saying, do evolutionists understand how the evolutionary process works? Because why would we be having this third way of evolution, which is trying to criticize Darwinian evolution and all the other mechanisms? They're trying to come up with all these alternatives to explain the emergence of complexity and what they call adaptation. So that's basically it. So when people say, Sal, you don't understand evolution, I said this to the evolutionists. Can you name one evolutionary biologist on the planet that understands it? Because you'll claim it, and you'll say, I don't understand it, and I'll come right back and say, I don't think you guys understand it either, because I'll ask you these questions, how did this evolve? And you'll say, we don't know. But it evolved. You just don't understand. And I'm like, well, you can tell me how. Then maybe I can understand. But if you don't know, how can you say I don't understand?
Yep. And then, by the way, that is one of the most common things you'll get from an evolutionist is basically, yeah, you just don't understand evolution. Okay, sure.
So the alternative is they'll say that we understand evolution, but we're being dishonest. We know it really works, but we're being dishonest.
Sometimes you'll get both of those at the same time. Sometimes you'll get both of those. You just don't understand evolution. You're just lying for Jesus. Well, in order for me to lie about something, I have to actually understand it. Because, like, if I don't understand something, I can't lie about it because I can't possibly represent it accurately no matter what. So I can be misrepresenting it. I can be saying things that are untrue, but I'm not lying because I don't have knowledge. I don't have the knowledge. So you got to pick one.
And I don't think they do either.
No, they don't.
Goodness. I mean, yeah, we don't need to beat a dead horse again today. We'll beat it later. We'll move on to other things.
We'll beat
the
it later.
Sternberg-Collins Paradox. The Sternberg-Collins Paradox. So, and I did have a graph of this, and it's just going to bog down my computer if I show it. Just think, just imagine that you have in any book that has two versions. How about the book Jane Eyre? And let's say then we take the book Jane Eyre and we make one rendition where all the names are Jane. Everywhere it says Jane Eyre, we're going to convert it to Mary Eyre or Mary. And so we'll say, okay, it's very clear that we made two versions of the book and they descended from a common conceptual ancestor, Jane Eyre. We can do that. So we have one that's Jane Eyre and the other book Mary Eyre, but otherwise they're identical. Clearly that is not an accident that we did that. We had to go and do a global search and replace. That could be done easily now in the computer age. So how does this relate to a problem for evolutionary biology? And this is the Sternberg-Collins Paradox. So keep in mind this analogy with the books, because this is the problem. Even if we assume that mice and rats descended from a common ancestor, what happened was there these things called signs. All the signs in like the mouse lineage, in the corresponding positions in the rat are different. And this is very problematic for evolutionary theory because it's not so much for common descent, but it's like, why did we end up having insertions in all these locations in pretty much the same location in the genome? But they're different strings, so to speak. Like Mary and Jane are different strings. In this case, these are DNA strings. So could you bring
right? So let me pause this to make sure it's clear for everybody and make sure it's clear for me. What you're seeing is insertions at the same places in the genome. So the same location, you're getting some kind of substitution into the genome, but they're different insertions. Right? So in the analogy, in place one, you're going to say, okay, the rat is going to have Mary and the mouse is going to have Jane. They're at the same place. Like if you're reading the genome across the, doing your A's A's, C's, T's, and G's across the line, they're going to fall in the exact same places, exact same locations in the genome, but they are going to have different insertions at those locations, correct? All right, go ahead then. I just want to make sure that was clear for everybody.
Okay, so the reason I'm highlighting this, Paul Nelson, who's a young Earth creationist, but he works for the Discovery Institute. So there are a few of us who are both in the young Earth camp and also participate in the intelligent design movement. The intelligent design movement is mostly old Earth, progressive type creationists. Stephen Meyer I would put in that category.
Yeah, I think he's progressive creation, if I recall.
Yeah, but the reason that some of the progressive creationists, I get along with, they're not like, they don't go out and attack the young Earth creation community. They're very muted. And Stephen Meyer is kind of like that. He'll just say, this is what I believe, but let's just focus on the complexity. And I can get along very well with people like that. And so Paul Nelson is part of the Discovery Institute. Even though he's a young Earth creationist, I think he's one of the best scholars on this. He got his PhD University of Chicago in philosophy of biology. He's published in secular venues, which is really hard to do given he's a young Earth creationist, but professionally he's so respected. He was a joint co-author. He was a co-author with Richard Buggs on orphan genes and a Oxford publication. I mean, you just don't get those opportunities unless you're good. And you can be a young Earth creationist and do stuff that the secular world will really respect you for. And when he read this by Sternberg, he said he got chills. He got chills. And I'm like, yeah, this is good. And I don't think people appreciate this as much as they should. So it's not, I just want to caveat, it's not immediately a criticism of common ancestry, but you need miracles to make this work, in other words. So let me try to read what Sternberg said, and if I fumble through it, and then this is my interpretation of it. Emory, maybe you can help me out. So
sure.
Let me share my screen here. This is something I wrote, and this is also a nice chance to take a little swipe at Swami Das. So the point is, Sternberg's point is that if mutational events happen, it was non-random. Okay, so let me see. Okay, so I'm just going to read what I wrote at the time. The mouse and rat genomes look very similar, but there are sequences that repeat over and over again in each of their respective genomes and mostly in the same corresponding locations. If these sequences were identical in both lineages, there would not be much of an issue, but they are different even though they are in the same general corresponding locations. Let me call one set of repeating sequences in the mouse genome Mary and the other corresponding sequence in the rat genome Caroline. So instead of Jane, it'll be Caroline. The name Mary appears in numerous places in the mouse genome and the corresponding places where Mary appears in the mouse genome. Caroline appears in the rat genome. Of course, this was a figurative way of describing what is going on. Mary is in reality the B1, B2, B4 set of sign retro elements in mice, and Caroline is in reality the ID sign retro elements in the mouse. But don't get hung up on the fancy language. The basic problem of non-random changes from a supposed common ancestor is brutally evident. A graph that shows this non-random change is here and explained in Sternberg's essay. So that's a picture from Sternberg's essay, which he got from a paper by Francis Collins. And I'm not going to try to interpret the graph. I'm just throwing this out there. You could find it. Just Google Sternberg-Collins Paradox. You'll find my essay on this. Sternberg's point is that if mutational events happened, it was non-random. Since to suppose it was random is an absurdity in the extreme. It cannot be the result of random DNA copying errors, but some non-random copying mechanism if common descent were true. Is the non-random pattern the result of natural selection? Sternberg doesn't address that question. But if the non-random sign pattern is the result of selection, then this would mean the signs aren't junk DNA. So that's kind of a catch-22 for the junk DNA advocates. But if natural selection is assumed as the mechanism, there would be issues of the evolvability of so many nucleotides simultaneously. We're talking maybe 300,000 sign insertions in each lineage. 300,000. For the mice, the B1 sign is about 150 base pairs and homologous to the 300 base pair primate ALU. And I've done work on the ALU elements, published with Dr. Sanford on that. The B2 sign is 190 base pairs. I could not find the size of the ID rat sign, nor the mouse B4 sign, but I presume they are within the range of most other signs, say 70 to 540 to 400 base pairs. The source article in Nature which Sternberg referenced and had a bazillion co-authors can be found here, and that's the title of it: Genome Sequences in the Brown Norway Rat Yields Insights into Mammalian Evolution. The article points out, and interrupt me anytime, Emory.
No, you go ahead.
Despite the different fates of the sign families, the number of signs inserted after speciation in each lineage is remarkably similar, approximately 300,000 copies. How'd that happen?
That's a good question.
Sternberg highlights the issue of having 300,000 non-random insertions happening in parallel in two, and I'll point out here, two separate lineages after they split. He lays out the paradox, which is the focus of the OP here, beginning to decipher the sign signal. You can find that maybe, if you Google this article, you have all the hyperlinks here.
I actually just dropped it in the chat, Sal. So
oh, thank you, thank you. So for what it's worth, I suspect there are probably similar issues with the ALU elements that appear in primates. And I would say that's more forcefully true because after I did this, I did work for Dr. Sanford on the ALU elements, and I can attest to that. Certainly this would be an issue if the mouse B1 homologous to the primate ALU is in homologous locations in the primate genome. If that's the case, then the Sternberg-Collins paradox is in play as well for primates. Perhaps one day we'll know for sure if this is the case. I was not able to pursue that final paragraph further. I will say the synteny differences between primates and rats or mice is too different. So I don't think that I don't think that hypothesis I threw out there can hold. Now my little swipe at Swami Das. Swami Das would of course say, oh, this is no problem for evolutionary theory. Me, as being a PhD MD, I know about all this, and transposases will fix that. Well, he said it's going to just insert it in the same places because that's how transposases work. Well, I started looking into that, and I'm like, you totally got the wrong enzyme. It's reverse transcriptase for one. So you've just lost credibility here, buddy. And I was down a rabbit trail trying to figure out how do transposases insert signs. It's a reverse transcriptase. So that's for the aficionados.
Yeah, I was going to say that would be the wrong. Even hearing that's not the right enzyme.
So what am I pointing out? This is it's no problem for evolutionary biology, Swami Das, and he can't even get the mechanism right. Can't even identify the right enzyme. So this is how this stuff is dismissed. He's not going to consider it. He's so sure of himself, and he can't even get the right enzymes involved. It's like, okay, you lost credibility there, bud. And that was when we were on good terms. I welcomed him. I said, greetings, nice to hear from you. I've since had a change of heart after
The Wall Street Journal article.
Yeah, a Wall Street Journal article where he's trying to out creationist. So let me take this down. Emory, if you have any thoughts, I just thought I'd share that with you because if it made Paul Nelson get chills, I figured.
Yeah, I'm going to have to read the original Sternberg essay because I've not read that yet. But it looks like there's a great possible avenue for research there that just has not been touched.
And I'm going to talk about the importance of, I have a video here I'm going to share. So what would you think is in those sign elements that's really important? And
DNA?
It has DNA, but it has a certain sequence called CTCF. Hang on, let me turn off my, okay, I got me focused here. It is a, okay, so you think of these sign elements. Why would it be, Swami Das is arguing the random insertions, transposases, put those random insertions, and I just laugh. Reverse transcriptase. But why those particular locations? Sign elements often have CTCF binding sites. And they're very important. You know how you have when we're typing out English paragraphs and you have parentheses, you have a left paren and you have a right paren.
Mm-hmm.
The CTCF binding site has to be oriented in one direction or the other. It's going to be on one strand in one location, and then on that same strand you need the reverse complement. That's just amazing. Like 200,000 base pairs downstream, because it's going to form these things called extrusion loops. You can't put these things in random spots and expect the genome to work, in other words. CTCF binding sites are critical to 4D nucleome organization of the chromatin. You're not going to get nice gene regulation if you blow this apart. And guess where some of those CTCF binding sites are? Sitting right there on the signs. I'm going to show a 3-minute video. I think we have a copyright release on this. So, Emory, you have a more powerful computer, I think. What kind of computer do you have?
Asus VivoBook.
Okay, I'm going to take a risk. This may totally blow up. I'll take the risk. I'll try to run it on my computer because I have my backup running.
Well, mine's new, Sal. Mine's only less
than
a year old. So
can you Google extrusion loop? The loop extrusion model.
Extrusion loop.
Yeah.
Is
the loop extrusion model. It's the Google term is the loop extrusion model. It's a 3-minute
loop extrusion model. Or Sal, you can just put the link in the private chat, and I can open that link, and then that'll save me from trying to find the right link.
Why didn't I think? See, that's why I need you, Emory.
I don't think you need me, Sal. Your channel's a whole heck of a lot bigger than mine.
Okay, there you go.
All right,
and then if you can, there is an option to, you can either share your screen, but you have to enable the audio. There's like when you do share screen, it'll say Google tab or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I've been doing. I'll share my screen real quick.
All right.
Loop
in the meantime, if people are wondering what that banner is that's talking about McLean Bible, we've covered a little bit of that in on this channel, because a lot of I got over 1,000, about half my subscriber base are interested in McLean. So I did want to cater. So if you you just have to maybe expand and enable your audio.
Pop this to full screen. And let me know, chat,
Go
let me know
ahead.
if you can hear audio.
Alrighty.
Study, we show that when the 2-meter-long human genome folds
Can hear
inside
it,
the
alrighty.
microscopic nucleus of a cell, it forms 10,000 loops. Each of these loops connects 2 anchor points which are far apart along the chromosome, but which loop back, coming close together as the genome folds. In our new study, we find that loops form by a process called extrusion. Let's take a look at how this operates on a segment of DNA. First, an extrusion complex containing 2 subunits attaches to DNA, forming a small loop in the process. Next, the 2 subunits slide along DNA in opposite directions, making the loop grow bigger and bigger. The extrusion complex looks for a specific motif, a DNA word, which causes a protein called CTCF to bind to the DNA. If a subunit encounters the CTCF motif that is pointing at it, the subunit tends to stop. If the CTCF motif is pointing the other direction, the motif won't be recognized. To the subunit, the motif looks as though it is backwards. This behavior leads to a result we call the Convergent Rule. The pair of CTCF motifs at the ends of a loop must be pointing towards one another on the DNA. Our simulations also show that when loops form by extrusion, they lead naturally to the formation of what we call loop domains. This means that if 2 pieces of the genome are inside the same loop, they tend to bump into each other more often. In this physical simulation, you can see how the extrusion of 2 loops leads to the formation of 2 spatially segregated domains. Like the Convergent Rule, the association between loops and domains was observed in our earlier study, but at the time we did not understand why this was the case. Both findings, and many others that you can read about in our paper, can be explained by the extrusion mechanism. Extrusion is an exciting model for several reasons. First, loops that are formed by extrusion will be unknotted, so if you need access to the genetic information they contain, it's no problem. You can just stretch them out. Second, extrusion doesn't just lead to segregation of domains within chromosomes. A collection of chromosomes that are all jumbled up will naturally become segregated if extrusion takes place. The fact that chromosomes are segregated in this way inside the nucleus, forming chromosome territories, is well known. Similarly, when several chromosomes are close together, loop formation by extrusion won't lead to entanglements. In contrast, loops forming by diffusion would routinely lead to entanglements. This is important because when cells divide, their chromosomes must come apart. At scales much larger than the double helix, the structure of the human genome is poorly understood. Loop extrusion provides us with a richer understanding of the genome's 3-dimensional architecture.
Glory to God.
Amen. Wow.
Wow. Yeah. So by the way, the conference where Paul Nelson said I got chills, a researcher who will not be named said, "Oh, by the way, Paul, those things have CTCF binding regions." And then he showed this video, and all our jaws dropped. So that was like a double whammy.
Yeah. It's
It's
interesting.
like, oh, so now all this junk DNA starts to see like, oh, that looks really critical that it happens to be the same insertion. Oh, gee, why would it be like a duplicate? Why would you want to duplicate it? Well, maybe it has a duplicate. It's a binding site that draws all sorts of the right molecular machinery to it. Did you ever think of that, evolutionary biologist? You just think it's a random mistake of transposases? Sorry, now you get me on my rant here.
Yeah, it's true. 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 It's I mean, I don't understand necessarily all of that, but I'll tell you what, I do not want to be an evolutionist trying to explain how all that came into existence.
And they had the gall to say this is random junk. It can't be serving any purpose. It's like, you're not very creative in thinking of possibilities.
Yeah.
It's like, you know. Anyway, we can move on. I thought some of the audience would really appreciate that. We briefly, and I'll just cover this, since I dumped it in the comment section of my video, and I sent you an email. We talked about ancient fossils. I forgot there are also sharks and horseshoe crabs. And backstage, Emory asked me if I had any methods for determining the date of the most recent common ancestor. I said, it depends on the population structure model. And there are people that have simple formulas, but I do think it can be in an expanding population that comes from a like an original pair. I think the model is pretty easy. You just take the mutation rate per generation. And so if you've estimated that you've had this many generations, it's just a bit straightforward. But the thing that that I found is there are papers that said our estimated mutation rates for things like bacteria were probably off by a factor of anywhere from between 35 to 200, that the correct mutation rates could be like 200 times faster. And if that's the case, for other species outside of bacteria, that would mean our molecular clocks are indicating youth. So you combine that with these fossil, these living fossils species, you look at the divergence and you clock it. I'm just like, they could be all under 10,000 years. And I just haven't had the time to pursue that.
Yeah, you may send me down that rabbit hole instead.
Yeah, that's exactly that's my ulterior motive. I passed it on to John Sanford and he sent it off to other people, but you know, like you said, we're all stretched so thin. And it'd be worth looking into. So people ask, why am I young earth creationist? I've been giving a lot of reasons today, but I don't think the arguments that I have for young earth creationism are mature as I have for anti-evolutionism.
Yep.
And intelligent design. I do say this, ID is easy, young earth creation is hard. That's just,
yeah.
Yeah.
To me, ID is a baseline. Like, everybody should be able to agree on some formation of ID. Like, I don't care what form of ID you want to jump into, but everybody should be able to agree to some formation of ID. And then from there, we can go out and argue about what models of ID we want to argue about. But if you can't get to ID as a baseline, I kind of go, okay, well, what's wrong with you people?
Yep. So that's really all I had. Just, if you didn't feel like talking about it more tonight, we'll just move to our last two topics.
I haven't had enough time to review it yet, Sal, but both the last two topics are something I'm like, now I've got 5 things on the sheet of paper I've got to put next to me. Like, last night you gave me 3, and I got 2 more tonight. I mean, how am I ever going to get to all this stuff?
Well, my goal was I hope that I could at least get the discussion going, because if there are serious creationists out there, which I hope someday they might be reading this, they'll stumble on it. I hope they'll think about this. And I am meeting more and more creationist grad students, which is just wonderful. There are more and more of people like you and me. I can't explain why, but I think first off, I don't think creationists who want to go to secular universities that they'd want to go to the humanities right now. There are some disciplines that would still be good for Christians to go into. That would be the STEM fields. I do
Depends on
also
the STEM field
suspect.
and depends on the university, but yes.
I'm sorry, I missed what you said.
I said it depends on the STEM field and it depends on the university. Because in some places, some schools are teaching that 2 + 2 does not have to equal 4.
Or it's white man's mathematics or something, racist mathematics.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Yes, and there's that Cornell class on cosmology and racism.
See what I mean? Even the STEM fields are getting infected with this garbage.
So I can't explain it, but I do see more. And I would almost say that there is a shortage of science students. And guess who's helping fill the void? The creationists. Yeah.
Hi there.
So I think generally the threat is not being a creationist. It's the fact that you might not be using the right pronouns. I'm not kidding.
I think they're more right. I think a lot of these schools right now are more concerned with your gender identity, your skin tone, and whether or not you're willing to use somebody else's pronouns than they are with you being a creationist.
Yes. It used to be that I was very disturbed about being a creationist. What has happened, and Jordan Peterson, who I love, and his daughter recently became a Christian, praise God for that. I'm praying that he'll convert, because in the secular world, he has defended Christian values more than a lot of pastors I know.
Yeah. I think Peterson's close. So all of y'all in the chat, pray for him. I think he's close.
He's close. He was saying that his daughter miraculously recovered from all her ailments when she was a teenager. She had to have a hip replacement as a teenager, and then she had autoimmune diseases on top of that. She said it was a miracle. Frankly, it was a miracle. And I saw a picture of Michaela, his daughter. She looks so healthy now. And then she recently became Christian. I'm praying that she'll retain her newfound faith. She said she thought she heard God screaming at her in a dream. She woke up 5:30. That's about a few weeks after she gave her life to Christ, and God was telling her, you got to be 100% in, not just 75%. And she was saying she had a peace in her life she's never experienced before. And so I think, especially given the current political climate, she's not doing this to get street credibility.
No. You right now you don't become a Christian if you want to have street cred. You deconvert if you want street cred.
Yeah. So I'm very happy. So why did I mention Jordan Peterson?
Something about defending the faith.
Yeah, but he loves evolutionary biology, but I think he frames it in a way that's actually very ID friendly. And I'm hoping it. I'd be just happy for him to be a theistic evolutionist Christian at this point, because that's
the same way I am with Cygart. Like
yeah,
Cygart. I disagree with that man on a lot of things, but I'm happy he's not an atheist anymore. Like I'll take it. One of these days you'll end up in our camp, so Dr. Gard. You want to keep moving, you get there eventually. But
yeah, we love Cygart.
Yeah,
I love Cygart. He's been on this channel. But what did Peterson say? He said, evolutionary biologists, you better watch it. The postmodernists, the neo-Marxists do not like you guys anymore. You were useful. You're useful to their purposes before, but you're the next that's going to be on the chopping block.
Yeah, and some of them are figuring this out. I think Richard Dawkins is figuring it out.
This is the first time I heard it just this week. And so this accords, why am I saying this? Guys, creationists, grads, guys who want to go to college and study, you might have a bigger fight because of the pronoun and all the woke stuff, but you're not going to be fought on the science grounds because the evolutionary biologists are getting kicked out. And there's that
the ones that won't play the woke game.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting how this all plays out. But I'm just saying, it's a funny time, but why is it that we have people like Emory now matriculating? And I could name any number of more that I'm not going to reveal their identities.
Right.
And it's funny, when I was at the NIH, the FAS graduate school, I confided to someone that I didn't believe in evolution, and he said, "I don't either." And I'm like, whoa. And like, I had that same confession to another person. I'm just like, yeah. He said, "I read Michael Behe's book," and it's like, whoa. So the first two students I confessed who I was expressed, didn't believe in evolutionary theory or had skepticism. I'm like, who else can I go to? And it was very telling. I was in a class, and it's biochemistry, first semester, and the professor's drawing up this biochemical pathway. He said, "This is so beautiful. It's so well designed." And then he stopped himself. He said, "Oh, I'm not supposed to say that." The whole class laughed. As if everyone's like, "Oh, we know we're not supposed to say that, but it's so obvious." It was just so funny. And he said, "Oh, let me check that. I'm not supposed to say that." And I have it recorded. And I'm like, yeah, the sentiment is there toward design. And I talked to some NIH researchers, one that's relatively openly ID friendly. He said, yeah, my boss believes in intelligent design. A lot of people here do. Now, they may still believe in common descent, like Michael Behe. By the way, Michael Behe did his postdoc at the NIH. So there are a lot of people there that are sympathetic. They just kind of keep it to themselves. And so that wasn't on the docket. I don't know how I got on that topic, but
yeah, but no, you're making a good point. Like, I think because a lot of people out there are like, man, I don't want to destroy my career before I even get into it. They keep their mouth shut, and then maybe once they get tenure, once they retire, they come out of the closet. But I think now, like, if you're a Christian creationist grad student, you are going to have to deal with the Evo stuff, and there are going to be some professors who are old school and who are just going to boot you. But there are, because that generation is still there. I'm pretty sure that if you were a Richard Dawkins student, he'd boot you. But at the same time, there's other guys like Colin Wright, he no longer teaches, but he used to. He hates creationists, absolutely hates creationists, but he's anti-woke. And he's starting to realize, I follow him on Twitter, he's starting to realize that maybe these creationists aren't as big of an enemy as I thought they were. Like, for a while there, and he may still do this sometimes, he equated the creationists and the woke as levels of idiots. But I haven't seen him do that in a while. Yeah. So I think he's starting to realize that maybe these creationists aren't the enemy, because a lot of them back me up.
And what happened at Evergreen State, Eric Weinstein, evolutionary biologist, it was the woke guys that were almost assaulting him.
It was the woke guys calling for his head.
Yeah. So I don't know how we got on that topic, but I'm glad we covered it. So yeah, anyway, we'll move on. Again, Emory and I, we don't know exactly when. We have a tentative date to appear with Dr. Cardinell, and we'll ask him questions about evolution. We're not trying to embarrass him. We want to have a productive relationship with him.
Yeah.
So the next thing is the absurdity of saying birds and humans are fish. Okay, you being a bearmanologist, I'm gonna hand this one off to you. What you think about the evolutionary classification system?
Well, I mean, if you want to go down that road and you want to accept that classification, the cladistic classification system, then you're obligated to say that birds are dinosaurs, that birds are fish, that you're obligated to do so eventually if you string it out far enough backwards. Now, this is why I prefer the old Linnaean system. I think it's much simpler. and it works. It works. The evolutionists are desperately trying to get rid of it because it implies the existence of discontinuity within creation, which they do not like. They want to get rid of it. They actually want to get rid of it. Some of them even want to go so far as to dump the species rank because it implies discontinuity. Seriously, I'm not making this. I wish I was making that up, but I'm not. But they desperately want to get rid of the Linnaean system. They've pulled out something called 5.0 code, which really isn't taking off yet. It may eventually take off. I don't know if but at this point, it's kind of launch aborted. It's still sitting on the runway. But I have a copy of their rules and regulations somewhere around in my monstrous library. But and what they've done essentially is they've just done everything in terms of evolutionary classification. It's all clade based. There's no hierarchy really. It's just all clade based. And I suspect that some of the people who are throwing around the word, I mean, Matt McLean said this on my show, so I can quote him as saying it. That birds are dinosaurs. Well, I mean, if you accept the evolutionary classification scheme, then yeah, maybe they're dinosaurs. But why would you do that? Like, why would you accept a classification scheme that is anathema to Scripture? Like this scheme assumes common ancestry of all life, and Scripture denies that. If you're going to be a young Earth creationist and you're going to live by the Scriptures, why are you going to use a classification system that openly attacks what your own foundation is? Now, I don't know whether he just hasn't thought this through or what, but to me, that's just a pretty obvious one. Like, guys, like I get that there are problems with the Linnaean system. I get that. I know it's not a perfect system, but it's not. But it's a man-made system. It's never going to be a perfect system. So I get that. But why are we going to go to the evolutionary? Like what? Like when you tell a freshman college student that birds are dinosaurs, he doesn't hear, "Oh, I'm just using the evolutionary classification system for convenience." He hears, "Oh, you actually believe that birds evolved from dinosaurs." And this is why I ripped Ken Coulson for saying that evolution, that we can just say, "Oh yeah, things evolve." No, because when I say to a undergraduate freshman that this thing evolved from this thing, what they think I'm saying is over millions of years, evolution occurred. When what Coulson would be saying with it was, no, we just had some, we had a new species form or whatever.
So you have Ken Coulson. What does Matthew McLean believe? Does he believe birds are dinosaurs?
Yes.
Does he believe birds evolved from dinosaurs?
He says he does not.
Okay, so that's why I wanted to pose the question. I said you could just, what's the term? You move it up the taxonomic rank?
Yeah, you can just say, keep pushing it up the hierarchy. And
so are birds Sarcopterygian fish?
I didn't ask him that question, but I would assume that he would have, if based on his logic, he would have to say that birds are Sarcopterygian fish. Again, I didn't ask him this question, so if Dr. McLean sees this and he wants to correct me, that's fine. So, because I didn't ask
I want to ask him that question, because if you're going to use that line of classification, you got to use the rest, buddy.
Yeah.
And I mean, are you going to be just, I deliberately posed that question to highlight the absurdity of you being a creationist and then using evolutionary classifications. So let's move up the phylogenetic rank again. How about before we are multicellular creatures? Are we Chanoflagellates or whatever that?
Are we dinoflagellates? I mean, how far do you take this?
How about all the way to the prokaryotic ancestor? I mean, come on.
Yeah, I mean, even Evos, I don't hear them take it that far.
Not even Evos. I mean, even for them, they know that there are limits to this absurdity. But yeah, I'm just saying, if you're going to commit to a phylogenetic classification of architectures, it just doesn't work. Why does I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Why does the Linnaean system or some modified system seem to work? It's because you're not using common descent. You're just describing it in terms of architecture.
Right.
So what do I mean by architecture? A blender is different than a helicopter and a car or a piano. They're distinct architectures that one thing is just not the same. So you may have common elements that, like, say, all vertebrates share. I have no problem with that. But it's still a different architecture. I mean, you could have airplanes that have the same current, same engine that may be in a car. Some of the earlier airplanes had very similar, you could transplant an airplane engine into a car. I mean, some of the early ones, you didn't have a lot to work with, but they were still distinct architectures. And certainly airplanes have tires, just like cars have tires. All right. Mm-hmm. So when you say vertebrates may have they may have similar body plans and all, it's like, okay, yes, you're going to reuse it, but it's still a very distinct architecture. But now with cellular biology, we can actually see that at the cellular level, there are distinctions. And I was looking at centrioles and stuff. I just like, this is amazing. That you even sometimes see the distinction at the cellular level. So why not classify organisms according to architectures? And then the nice thing about that is you don't need one unified hierarchy. You can have cross hierarchies. You see this in protein biology, where you don't need to have an absolute classification system that you can't have overlapping hierarchies. So I'll give you this is like, because I don't study this that much, but for lack of a better word, you can classify organisms that fly and those that don't. And they will have, certain architectural features that enable them to fly, and then the ones that swim. But that's only one classification scheme, and you can do it any number of ways. And I see this in protein biology too. You can use overlapping hierarchical classification schemes. That works perfectly fine if you're talking about differences being based on kind of the conceptual descent from God's mind. But you don't even need to invoke theological terms. It's just, it can be just a convenience thing in being able to describe. So that's why I just find it absurd. That's why I wanted to throw that absurdity of, are we all Sarcopterygian fish? So that would mean giraffes, hippopotamuses, birds, the parrot. I'm just like, come on, guys, Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's legitimate. It's legitimate because, like, you got to ask the question, how far do you carry this? Like, if you, this is what you call reductio ad absurdum, because we're just extrapolating the logic out until it becomes absurd.
Yeah.
And I think, and I've said this on my show before, but I think one of the goals here is to lump as many groups together as possible, in part to accommodate the evolutionary common ancestry thing, but also I think in part to maybe make the fitting things on the arc a little bit easier. I'm not entirely sure, but like there seems to be a very large tendency to just accept whatever the evolutionary biologists say and then regurgitate it with creationist terms.
Yeah.
And just to show you the mindset of this movement, in Todd Wood's book that he co-wrote with Daryl Falk, he opens his section of the book saying that Dr. Falk is right about a lot of things. And one of the things he says he's right about is there's gobs and gobs of evidence for evolution. And yes, he actually said that. I showed that to a creationist paleontologist who's not really tuned in, from another country. And like the jaw just like hit the floor. So I have grave concerns about where this section of the creationist movement wants to go. And what makes it worse is most, if not all of them, teach at colleges that are creation friendly. Wood used to teach at Bryan. I don't think he's still at Bryan. I think he's his own thing now. Ross used to teach at Liberty. He's not there anymore. He's got his own business now he runs. McLean teaches at Masters. Joe Francis teaches at Masters. John Whitmore teaches at Cedarville. I mean, that's significant. There are some significant concerns I have about these guys. And I'm not saying that they're not Christians, and I'm not, it's not what I'm saying. I know people have taken me out of context and said that, no, that's not what I'm saying. But I have very serious concerns about where these guys are leading this.
And it doesn't even make scientific sense.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't, it's just, that's why Matthew McLean, you know, if I see you on some channel, I'm just going to say, so are you going to just take this to the next rank and say, is a parrot a fish? I mean, just, why would you want to classify it that way? It makes absolutely no sense architecturally. You know, anyway, I think we've beaten that horse up pretty badly, that dead horse. And I was going to throw one other thing out, but I'm having a Joe Biden moment. So we go to our last topic, which will be very short. I just wanted to say I got that. I had to dig up that thing about the centromeric regions.
Yes.
In the chimpanzees. I provided you what little I had.
Yeah.
And maybe, if not you, someone watching this, I hope you can take it and run with it. It could be an interesting project. How they said, well, definitely, I don't even remember what, let me see what I actually, how I quoted it from, I actually quoted it from the paper. And let me see what my comment was when I said that. And really that's about all I have on it, because it was one paragraph and that was the most interesting part. So what did it say? And I'll put it in the comment section and also in the video for people that want to reference this. It says, phylogenetic analyses confirm that human and chimpanzees Hor alpha satellites, Hor I think is higher order repeats, Hor alpha satellites share a common origin. Okay, so they're saying, okay, that's common descent there. This satellite repeat exists in humans and chimpanzees, therefore it's common descent. But there's a catch here. That is evolutionarily, okay, so let me just start again. Phylogenetic analysis confirmed that humans and chimpanzees, Hor alpha satellites, share a common origin that is evolutionarily distinct from the flanking peripheral monomeric sequences. Every major human alpha satellite suprachromosomal family shares homologous sequences with chimpanzees. So you have these families of Hors. So we have the exact same number of Hors. I'm sorry, it's just a terrible acronym. We all share the same homologous Hors of chimpanzees. Okay, now this is the kicker. Despite the fact that they map to non-orthologous, they map to non-orthologous chromosomes between the two species. How'd that happen?
Maybe they aren't descended from a common ancestor.
Exactly. So just compare and contrast. We had the Sternberg-Collins Paradox, named after Richard Sternberg's and Francis Collins. Francis Collins helped find part of this paradox, even though he's still a diehard Darwinist. But anyway, in that case, you had you had the sign elements in the rat and mouse lineages put in the same locations. This is in contrast to what's happening here. You have the identical repeat elements, but then you have them put in different locations between the chimps and humans. And when I look at these patterns of how these repeats are put in different places, I said, God has a real sense of humor. He'll put different repeats in the same location, and then he'll put the same repeats in different locations for the human chimp. I'm like, someone is just having so much fun messing with evolutionary biologists, giving them nightmares and giving creationists plenty of reasons to laugh at them.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep, I would agree with that. That definitely looks like God has gone, oh, you don't think I'm here? Oh, okay.
So I could tell I'm wearing you out because now we're at 2 hours and 10 minutes. And
yeah, I'm getting tired.
Yeah, I know you work very hard. And I have to admit, being snowed in at home, I lounged around and I took a 4-hour nap. That's why I'm all recharged.
I worked all day today.
Yeah, okay. So, Emory, I just want to say you've been a faithful friend. There are times you're so sick and you came out to my after show and here you are tired. And I just wanted to talk to someone on a Friday night. And,
it's fine, Sal.
Just nerd out on this stuff. Well, if you have a final word, when do you go back to school?
24. So I've got some time to do some more streams in between.
Okay. I really hope the ice starts to melt. I mean, I have been able to drive around, but at night when you get the refreeze, I just don't want to be doing that. And then it's been a little bit limited. So I don't, that's probably one reason I kind of had a huge data dump the last 2 nights, because I don't know the next time we'll be able to do this.
Right.
And otherwise your list is going to grow to 10 if we have any more streams.
Just so long as I can chew some of that stuff off the list between now and graduate school starting.
Yeah. Please have the last word, Emory. I'd be honored. So.
Yeah. So first of all, everybody, thank you for showing up and then sitting through. Some of you have been here for all 2 hours, which that's fantastic. Thank you for being nerds.
Our longest stream was 6 hours, 15 minutes. That was just, we're not going to go there tonight. We're almost done.
Yeah. 6 hours would be a lot, even for me at this point. But we did do that at one point. No, but thank you all for showing up. Appreciate it. If you aren't subscribed to my YouTube channel, subscribe. No, I'm just kidding. You don't have to do that. I'm not. That's my only self-promotion. But definitely, thank you for supporting Sal. Sal is the brains. I'm the brawn. I'm the guy who's going to knock down doors. Sal's the nice guy. But thank you all for showing up, and thank you for listening to me and Sal nerd out for 2 hours. I think there's a lot of good information here, and I think that it will be very helpful to all of us. And I think there's some projects here that if I actually understood what I was talking about, or if I had the time, which is probably the bigger objection, I would be able to dig my way into and get some valuable data out of. But yeah, it's gonna be fun. I'll see what I can do in the next, I don't know, 3 weeks or whatever. So.
Well, thank you. And I do want to tell the audience Emory's been fighting the flu. So I'm extremely, again, doubly grateful. So if you see him looking a little bit worn out, that's part of it. And
yeah, I sound significantly better than I did last night. Last night I sounded like I was about 3 octaves lower than my usual voice, but it's only about 1 octave tonight. So,
I may email you if I just happen to have that urge to have another nerd out session,
Yeah.
But
definitely,
this was a lot of fun for me.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. I always enjoy these. Always enjoy these. And if you want to have another one tomorrow, let me know. I'll make some time.
All right. It most likely will be toward the evening. And so anyway, thank you for joining, Emory, and all the viewers joining us live and also through recording. Take care.
Take care.
And may the Creator and the Lord Jesus Christ bless you richly. God bless. Have a good evening. Good night.